Today, LEGO just announced 2 brand new idea sets that will be coming out in the future. And we're here to break them down, tell you a little bit more about the context, and maybe poke around the question of, did LEGO make the right choices? Let's go ahead and dive in. Now, LEGO Ideas is one of our favorite themes because it gives us a lot of really interesting builds, and it allows for the opportunity for licensed sets that don't see a whole theme still get some one-off sets. And we definitely see that with today's announcement because the 2 sets that LEGO chose are Godzilla and the Tintin rocket. And we're going to break these down. Let's start by going over the rocket. The Tintin rocket is a red and white checkered rocket on a tan launch pad with a yellow gantry. Now, I think this is a really interesting option from a building perspective because we know that building round objects in LEGO can be very difficult. That said, LEGO has done a fantastic job in the past of providing us similar style sets with a high level of build and a very, very good execution. For instance, the Saturn V rockets, one of my favorite sets of all time, was a wonderful build with a beautiful result. And that's actually pretty similar to this Tintin rocket in terms of concept. Of course, LEGO also has the Artemis launch system set that's available right now that again uses some rounded building techniques to achieve the look of the set. So there are some distinct possibilities. What I find curious about the Tintin set is, of course, the fins and the tail that go down. I think that's going to be an interesting building technique to see how those are connected to the set and still achieving that curve. Of course, another interesting element to this set is the yellow gantry. Now, when I take a look at this, I see a lot of pieces that are kind of wasted in terms of a repetitive build and not a lot of interesting techniques going on there. It's a lot of those yellow big wall pieces that have the crossbars in them and reminds me again of the Artemis space launch. And one of the reasons I wasn't a huge fan of that was not only just because of the price, but also the repetitiveness of the build. And I wasn't huge into the subject matter. And the same kind of applies with this one. I'm not a huge Tintin fan, so I'm not personally excited for it, but I know that there are a lot of fans of the comic book. Now, one thing I really do like about this, and I think is going to be interesting to see if LEGO keeps it, is that tan launch pad. LEGO doesn't usually include this kind of a base to a set. We see that a lot with MOCs, but not necessarily with official LEGO sets. So I'm wondering if LEGO is going to keep it that way, and if so, how that's going to work out. The second set that LEGO chose is the Godzilla set. And I gotta be honest with you, it's about time that LEGO finally approved Godzilla. Now, it could have been because of licensing issues, or they were waiting for the right design, or the right moment, whatever it may be. There have been tons of submissions about LEGO Godzilla for a long time on ideas, and now we're finally getting one that's approved. Now, this is a massive set. I couldn't find the piece count on the Ideas website, but this is a Godzilla that is based off of the more recent movies, and it's an absolutely massive set with a lot of interesting building dynamics to it. Now, a lot of you might look at this and say, okay, it's a lot of black, maybe some dark gray, but there are going to be some very, very interesting decisions that LEGO is going to make when it comes to contouring the monster, right? If you think back to the T-Rex set, Rampage set from a few years ago, contouring the T-Rex was very, very interesting how LEGO was going to do that. We now have another 4 to 5 years of piece development and options for how that could work on this set. And it wouldn't surprise me to see some significant deviations from the submission to the final copy when it comes to this, especially as it relates to stability and getting that contouring just right. I'm also curious to see if LEGO is going to add anything to this set. It's already a massive set, so it's going to be pretty expensive. But do you see some additional elements added in order to increase the playability? With the Tintin rocket, you've got a rocket, you can launch it, you can swoosh it, it's all that fun stuff. But with Godzilla, there's so many iconic elements to the Godzilla franchise over the years that there would be, I think, an incentive for LEGO to provide something that you could use to interact with the Godzilla. Of course, that is going to add more pieces and more price to the set, but is that going to maybe help make that something that's palatable for a lot of fans, even casual fans of the franchise? So 2 large sets announced. huge fan bases, many attempts to get these approved by LEGO over the years, and it's finally happened. When LEGO chooses these two sets, that means that they're neglecting or rejecting a lot of others. And in this review period, there were over 50 sets available for LEGO to choose. 2 of them made it, which meant that over 50 were not chosen. Now, there are a lot of fans of all of those designs. Every single one of them had to get 10,000 votes of support. The ones that I particularly liked were the lake house and the functional microscope. There were some others that were intriguing, but I didn't think LEGO would pick because they were too much like modular buildings or like future upcoming idea sets. Like there was one that was based in Italy that looked too much, I think, like the Italian Riviera that's going to be coming out soon. So there were some that were, I think, obviously going to be rejected, but there were some that I really liked that weren't picked. And I'm guessing for those of you watching this video, you might be saying the same thing. And one implication of this with the 2 licensed sets being picked, what about the non-licensed sets? Well, I think it's important to keep in mind the backlog of idea sets that will be coming out over the next year or 2. And there are quite a few non-licensed sets in these, starting with, of course, the Italian Riviera that I just mentioned, where rumor has it that will be coming out in the next couple of months. So make sure you stay tuned and pay attention to LEGO announcements and, of course, our channel, which we will be breaking down that set when it is announced. And so I'm curious for that one. We know that in the last the last ideas selection period, 2 sets were chosen. One was non-licensed, one was licensed, the Sea Otter and then Snoopy. So LEGO's trying to strike a little bit of a balance here. Now, of course, there were 2 sets chosen. There are also 2 sets placed in what's known as LEGO's parking lot. In other words, we're going to keep these off to the side and maybe approve them. One of them was already in the parking lot, and that was the Downton Abbey Castle. The other one, though, is part of the review period this quarter, and it is the camping trip, which I think is probably my favorite of the 4. So I really hope it gets made into a set. Now, this set features a large red camping tent surrounded by trees and nature and rock formations and a Jeep-like vehicle that is packed up for a camping trip. I think it looks beautiful. I think it's got a lot of interesting building techniques, and it is placed in the parking lot. And I think there are a couple reasons why LEGO could be exploring their options. One reason could be that there is a similar style set coming out in the Bricklink Designer Program Series 6 that will be, I think, eligible for pre-order sometime in October thereabouts. But also, it could be because of different piece selections. I think there's a large windscreen type piece that's being used in that set that has only been produced in transparent color. So LEGO could be evaluating its ability to use that piece, which was last seen, I think, in a set in 2017, according to one comment I saw on brickset.com. Or it could be trying to figure out, if we can't use that, how do we then build this so that we actually can be relatively true to the source material, being the idea submission. So that's in the parking lot and is my favorite. I'm most excited about that. Honestly, of the 4, my second favorite would be the Downton Abbey, even though I'm not a huge fan of the show. I never really got into it, but I do love castles. So did LEGO make the right decision here? Now, we don't really, I don't think, have a concrete answer for that. I think that could take on a lot of different meanings, right? From one standpoint, it could be, do you like licensed sets versus unlicensed sets? And if you like unlicensed sets, then you're not going to be happy with these 2 selections. If you do like licensed sets, you could also be unhappy because they didn't choose the license that you wanted. So I think there are a lot of people that can be unhappy with that. I think there are also, another element of this is the ability for LEGO to sell these sets. And I think from that perspective, LEGO probably did a decent job. There's a huge fan base for both of these licenses. And let's be honest, there will be a lot of people that might not be traditional LEGO fans that would get into LEGO to purchase these. And that's something that LEGO's definitely going to be keeping an eye open for. What new licenses can we even give a one-off set for that's going to bring in new customers and maybe build a brand new clientele. So expanding their customer base is certainly part of it. And from that perspective, LEGO might have made the right selection. Of course, there were a lot of sets that I was hoping LEGO would maybe pick from that they chose not to, right? 2 of them that I think of are both unlicensed, one being the Lake House, the other one being the workable microscope, or the functional microscope, which I think turned out very, very well, and intriguing building techniques, striking appearance. I was kind of hoping they would pick those, but they didn't. Let me know what you think in the comments below. Are you excited for any of the ones that are actually chosen? Or which ones were you hoping that would actually have been picked that didn't get picked? Put that all down in the comments below. Thanks for watching, and always remember to keep building together.